Hello, I'm John Boyd, Manager of Law Enforcement Relations for Utility. Utility is an innovative technology company that continually delivers groundbreaking digital systems for frontline professions that depend on speed, accuracy, easy to access data, and transparency in their work. I'm a retired sheriff from LaPorte County, Indiana, and served 34 years in law enforcement. I'd like to thank you for joining us today for Space for Knowledge, where we're joined by Chris Fronk, a chief deputy prosecuting attorney for the the St. Joseph County Prosecuting Attorney's Office in Northern Indiana. He's going to provide us expert insight into digital evidence management and how it is revolutionizing legal workflows. Chris, welcome to Space for Knowledge. Tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, John. It's good to be here with you. I My relevant personal history seems to start in college, where I went to Valparaiso University here in Northern Indiana. Played football on the offensive line, which set me up well for a life of relative anonymity but hard work as a public servant. I've got almost 30 years in as a prosecutor. Um, Started at the juvenile delinquency level. That was the offenders, not myself. Juvenile delinquency level, and worked my way up to major felonies. And for the last 9 years, my caseload has been strictly homicides. I'm a trial prosecutor. I'm not really much of an administrator. So when I talk to you about my experience, it's going to be from the boots on the ground perspective.
Yeah, it's going to be really invaluable insight. We appreciate you being here. And you and I have kind of a long history together. I remember when you started in the mid 1990s at the LaPorte County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, and our paths crossed quite regularly in misdemeanor court. A lot of traffic infractions, a lot of trials held in Superior Court number 3 and Superior Court number 4. And it's great to see how your career has really blossomed. You do an outstanding job. You're a great litigator in the courtroom, and I'm really honored that you're taking the time to be here with us today and let us know some of your expert experiences that you've had. And you've served, as you indicated, nearly 30 years in prosecution. You've seen a lot of changes throughout your career, a lot of transformations. Would you say that the evolution of technology has been one of the greatest transformations that you've seen?
Absolutely. The court system, the court process really hasn't changed that much since Abraham Lincoln. Technology is definitely the area where the change has occurred. And not only has it occurred, it continues to occur, sometimes at a pace that seems to be accelerating.
So, experts and surveys indicate that probably 90% of all criminal cases involve digital evidence. Have you noted this increase, and has it benefited prosecution?
I've definitely noted that increase in some capacity. Technologies, I would say 100%. We're involved in 100% of cases with technology, digital evidence, because even if you don't have it, you have to explain why you don't have it, because it's become an expectation of jurors that you will have it, because they know they create a digital trail for everything they do. They're that savvy on the issue. So I would say it's probably north of 90%, and that is exactly what I've seen in my practice.
So, with the increase in digital evidence, how is it effectively processed and managed and stored? That seems to be a real concern.
Um, there's a there's a couple of points in there. One, how is it effectively managed? I think we manage it in spite of ourselves sometimes, or attempt to manage it. I don't know that it's effectively managed in all cases. I know certainly we have issues with that, and we are probably one of the more forward-thinking prosecutors' offices in that regard. And we still have a lot of issues and a lot of ground where we feel like we're playing catch-up on the constant daily level. So those are some of the challenges that we'll probably talk about today: is how do we effectively manage and control and utilize all that digital evidence.
Yeah, so you and I have talked before, and one of the expressions that I use quite a bit for law enforcement is administrators should not task an officer with something that technology can do. Do you have that same mantra in prosecution?
I do believe that that's a truism, but I got to say that there's still a huge place in our work for the personal contact and everything to that nature. But technology really allows uh, itself to be used as a force multiplier. One officer can do lot more work if he's if he's effectively utilizing technology than he can if he's just going old school and looking through papers, printing everything off and going through papers and so on and so forth. That's not a forward thinking or progressive way of going about taking care of technology and digital evidence.
So with technology in the prosecution, is it create more work? Is it manpower intensive? Is it difficult to? I know I'm throwing a lot of questions here, but just so many come to my mind. Uh, I know prosecutors' offices are just as strapped for staffing and budgets as law enforcement. Is it the same for prosecution?
Absolutely. And when we're talking about digital evidence in our office, what we're talking about is body worn cameras and car cameras from multiple officers on scene at any incident, right? We're talking about radio traffic. We're talking about home and business surveillance footage. We're talking about flock footage. We're talking about jail calls and chirps, texting after the fact. We're talking about social media accounts and all of the data that's contained in those, and Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram and so on. We're talking about medical records in some cases. We're talking about cell phone dumps with a huge volume of data that eats up. We're talking about digital photography, and that's just the start of it. So to go through and properly catalog all that information, well, to secure it and then to catalog it and then to make it accessible and get it associated with the right cases for prosecution, make it accessible for the prosecutors, and it's just a very labor intensive thing. And we're fortunate in our office to have a couple of guys. We have a couple of positions where that's their job. They're data management and data retrieval specialists for us. Not a lot of prosecutors' offices, I think, are able to do that, but the volume that we have forces efficiencies on us, and those guys are indispensable to us. So yeah, it's very manpower intensive, very expensive. Data storage is a huge issue with all that kind of digital evidence. Data storage costs, and so that's another thing where the county purse strings don't really want to get loosened for more manpower or more data acquisition and storage expenses. Nobody wants to pay more taxes, so that's what we're up against.
Yeah, so you said something that I really cued in on just a little bit ago. You talked about the St. Joseph County prosecutor and how innovative they are, and I agree with that. You're very forward thinking. You're really the model of prosecutor's office in the Midwest, from my experience. So, how does a progressive, forward thinking prosecutor's office, such as the St. Joseph County prosecutor's office, how do you approach the collection, the storage of digital evidence, and what kind of special considerations do you have?
So everything in our office is digital. We went paperless before COVID, which really allowed us to truck on through COVID relatively unscathed because we could work from home because there's no paper that needed to change hands. So our office, we're also uniquely postured with those two gentlemen I told you about, our data guys. They have access to our main three law enforcement agencies databases, servers, and they can go in and get material for us from those servers. But that does, there's limits, but we have more resources than a lot of places. So we have data retrieval and analysis and, organization, some of that in-house, which is a huge benefit to the prosecutors because we don't have to do that ourselves. The other things that we've done are we have integrated as many of our systems as we can so that when that information is plucked from the police agencies or uploaded by the police agencies to our server, that we can streamline that process. And when a case has been filed, get a link to that location of that data to the defense attorneys for our discovery purposes. We have access to that for purposes of preparing for trials. We can do that from home. We have our VPNs and security type measures that they're in place. And we really have made it such that the data becomes not an afterthought, but an integral part of the case and the prosecution and the preparation of the cases.
Yeah, so physical evidence has a need for a strict chain of custody. Are you finding that that's true? Are the demands of the courts the same for digital evidence?
To a certain extent, and you and I talked about this a little bit earlier. One of the advantages that we enjoy largely is that the more experienced attorneys are handling the most serious cases, and the more experienced generally means a little bit older, and that also comes with some of them being technologically challenged. So a lot of times, what we see is that our officers that are testifying about the technology and the data, the digital evidence, are the foremost experts in the courtroom on that evidence. So the defense attorneys haven't really caught up on the higher felony level with the technology, just like most of the rest of us. They're lagging behind, so they don't know how to properly challenge those issues. But when they do, that's going to become a very important link in the chain, because digital evidence isn't like a firearm where the officer takes a picture of the firearm on the scene in the field and you can see the serial number. And then when you have it in the courtroom, you can look at it and say, oh, look, it's the same serial number. It's the same firearm. It hasn't been changed in any meaningful way since that first picture that we saw. Digital evidence doesn't come like that. The timestamps are something that are a little esoteric, whether it's in metadata or whatever. The point is that you can't just play a video and say, oh, it's unchanged, and everybody can accept it because it is. So that's going to become a thing if it's not already.
So, therefore, do you see a real importance for audit trails in a digital evidence management system so the court can see exactly who's been in and viewing and manipulating that digital evidence?
I think that could be very important for a foundation. Yes.
Yeah, it's really interesting because for years, I'm an old law enforcement guy. We have a perception in law enforcement that attorneys, defense attorneys in particular, always go after the officers and or their integrity. If they can't get the officer and their integrity, then they go after the physical evidence. So you're saying that there's maybe a little bit of a drop off right as of now, as we speak. As far as digital evidence, because there isn't that comfortability with the defense bar yet as a whole, knowing their way around digital evidence in its management.
That's what I've seen. You may have in Silicon Valley, LA or somewhere like that, you may
Sure.
have savvy defense attorneys, but here in the upper Midwest, we're not usually on the forefront of technology and innovation. So that's what I'm seeing now, personally. I think that's a wave that's going to crash. And so there's going to come a day and a time where that becomes increasingly important, though.
Yeah, so we've talked already about being short-staffed and under budgeted in prosecution. How can digital evidence management tools improve workflows and increase efficiencies in the ideal prosecuting attorney's office?
One of the things I'm hoping and waiting for is assistance in, and we talked briefly about AI being this thing that's on the horizon, right? So one of the things I'm looking forward to and hoping for is AI helping us to mine the data from the agencies and from other entities, flock cameras and things like that, where now we have detectives have to go through the flock cameras and run the searches there and all of that stuff. And flock cameras, for those that don't know, those are just the cameras, the passive cameras that are on your traffic control devices, your stoplights and things like that. And they catch pictures of license plates of cars as they drive by. And sometimes you can tell things like who's in the car, how many people are in the car, what direction the car was headed, and it gives you a good timestamp. So that's a flock camera. But that's the kind of data that's out there in the community and floating around, but you have to retrieve it. You have to know how to use it. You have to analyze it, and you have to get it associated with the right case in the right timely fashion. So I see AI being valuable for mining some of that data, and then for you've assimilated all of this data in one place, hypothetically. I want AI to help me go through it so I don't have to look at all of it to know what is useful for me. So those are some of the things that I look for in the future, some of the ways that I think technology could really come a long way in being of assistance to the prosecutor's office and law enforcement.
So with all that being said, you've hit on some really important components. What essential tools and features do you think an effective digital evidence management system has to have to revolutionize workflows and improve efficiencies for legal professionals?
Well, I briefly told you that I think there's just a few things that we really are looking for, right? We want total security, but total access, and we want total simplicity and total comprehensive with regard to all of our digital evidence. Now, those are competing contentions. And in order to pull that off, it's really going to take integration of data and systems, and it's going to take technology that can really push the envelope as far as reliability and confidence instilling. I have to be confident that if the technology is going to go through and do these things for me, that it's going to be an effective force multiplier and it's not going to miss everything, right? So I need confidence in that technology. So those are the main things I'm looking for. Those are the things I'm working towards, and the technological tools to help me get there. That's where I got to admit, being a trial lawyer, I don't care how we do it, just make it work, make it do this. So, your technology companies, those are the places where I'm going to take and say, hey, these are my concerns. These are the things that I value. Help me get there. And so essential features, I mean, we need ease of access. We need to be able to integrate that data into the systems that we already have, make it accessible for everybody, make it organized, and help us analyze that data and present it.
Yeah. Would you say smart redactions would fall into that category of must needs as well?
I think so. That really, you do need to, because of the massive pile of digital evidence that you've accumulated, not all of it's pertinent, not all of it's germane. You need to be able to sort that and suss through that so that you don't personally have to do it, but yet you're not missing the important pieces. You're not throwing the weed out with the chaff. And it's just, we talked about limitations on manpower and cost. That's really going to be a driver in that area.
Yeah. So, through your experience, what are the primary hurdles that attorneys currently encounter when they handle digital evidence?
In our, there's two different worlds, right? There's our office, and then there's the defense bar. And I'm talking only in criminal law. Civil law, it's a whole different ball of wax. But from my perspective, the hurdles that we have are the accumulation and analysis, and the hurdles that the defense bar has is the same, yet a little heightened, because it's also not their system. We get to choose the systems, at least, and we get to be trained in those systems. The defense attorneys are going to have to make themselves proficient in going through. If we have smart redaction or we have AI go through and sort out what we think is important, and this is what we're going to use to present our case, is that a guarantee that and something the defense attorney might want for his case is going to be also included in that? No, that's not a guarantee. I've asked the AI to find what I want to look for. I haven't asked it to look for stuff that, I haven't talked to the defendant, so I don't know where he's thinking or what his angle is. So I don't know what defenses might need some sort of evidence that is counter to or in addition to what I'm looking for. So I really think that there's barriers for the technology being proficient in the technology and also being able to utilize it for their own purposes for the defense bar.
Yeah, you've got a lot of experience, and now, as you alluded to earlier, you're doing all homicide trials now. Do you have an example of specific cases where the implementation of digital evidence management system, the digital evidence itself, and the tools resulted in tangible improvements in your case preparation, litigation strategy, and then your courtroom presentation?
The case that pops into my mind now, even though we're one of the more technologically progressive offices that I know of, we are also still following instead of leading the technology. So we're a little bit behind the eight ball, just like everybody else is. I think we're left behind the eight ball than many, and that's what I'm getting at here. So the case that comes to mind is it's kind of got some pluses and some minuses to it, and there's lessons in all of that for us. We have a whole class of crimes in St. Joe County called Weed Rip Gone Bad. So it's a burglary or a robbery for marijuana, and it went sideways because everybody has guns. So in this particular case, the seller had his gun, and the robber did not have a gun, but the robber's accomplice did have a gun. The robber grabs the backpack and tries to take off with it that contained the marijuana, and the seller turned around and shot the robber in the backseat of his own vehicle. And so we had gone through and gotten search warrants for social media accounts, for cell phones, all of that kind of digital evidence that you normally would look for in a case. And my officers went through it and they found all this great information. And, we're getting our case ready. And it was just a few weeks before trial. And I happened to just feel like there was something more, maybe. And I was randomly going through this guy's Snapchat videos. And lo and behold, I find a video that my officers had missed because they're human and fallible. But the timeline was that it was the day after he had shot this guy, before the police had gotten to him or anything else. And he's talking on Snapchat about what a bad dude he was and how these dudes ran up on him. And he had a 30-round mag, but he only had to use 5 shots and so on and so forth, showing zero remorse, showing how prepared he was to take on anything like this. So he can't just say, oh, I was so startled. I didn't know what was going on. And it was really a kind of a big piece of the prosecution to have this piece of digital evidence. And it really was found just based on happenstance. So it's great that we had it, but it's almost useless if you don't know it's there and know how to get it. And it really was just dumb luck that we found that just a few weeks before trial. So that's a tale about how, it's great to have digital evidence, but you got to be careful about how you're using it and how thoroughly you're analyzing it.
Sure. So you shared with us your observations of the prosecution and the defense bar when it comes to digital evidence. How are judges with digital evidence?
Judges also are trailing, following along. Judges are very concerned about the foundation of the evidence, and then they're very concerned about the presentation of that evidence to the jury. As far as understanding the evidence, I count on each of my officers or my proponents of the evidence to demonstrate and teach the jurors about the evidence itself, how we got it, what it means, and the value they should place on it, and so on and so forth. And I think that is also the time and place where the judges are learning about it too. We count on having a courtroom that's tech able, where you've got screens and interfaces where you can convey this information to the jury. And we count on judges to make sure that they understand the proper foundations for different kinds of digital evidence. But aside from that, the judges themselves don't have to worry too much in most cases about the nature of the evidence or what it means, because that's largely up to the juries. And almost all homicide cases do go to jury. Very, very few are bench trials. So that's really the audience that I'm looking at when I'm talking about my presenting digital evidence is to the jury.
You see that judges are very cognizant or require strict safety or security measures for the digital evidence that is being handled and presented?
So there's a couple of parts to that. One part is, I'll start at the back end. Judges are the repositories for the evidence after the trial, and they have to preserve that and then get it to the Court of Appeals, because every criminal case in Indiana, you're entitled to an appeal of either the sentence or the conviction or both or whatever. So the courts are the repositories for the evidence from trial. So that's very important for them to have that and be able to maintain that integrity there. And then on the front end, of course, they're the gatekeeper to determine what comes in as evidence. And so they're very concerned on the front end about the proper foundation, like we had talked about, and making sure it's authentic and not manipulated. And those are the kind of things that the judges are concerned about on the front end.
So we talked about AI, artificial intelligence. Do you foresee that judges have a concern about AI? For instance, we can see on social media that a celebrity may be placed at a certain place at a time saying something that they didn't. It was artificial intelligence that actually created that likeness of them. Are judges concerned about AI in the future?
Now, coming, of course, from a prosecutor, not a judge at this point, I'm going to tell you that that's probably one of those things that's coming, but I don't think it's here yet. You have to remember that before it gets to the judge, as an ethical prosecutor, I need to be satisfied that the evidence is authentic too. And I'm dealing with officers that I know, and these officers have sworn an oath to uphold the laws and the Constitution. I've sworn an oath to uphold the laws and the Constitution, and I'm also an officer of the court. So at some point, Is it a concern? Yes. Are we going to be able to totally remove that concern via digital means? The proper paper trail, the proper channels? Probably not, because as soon as you set the bar and say nobody can get out of Stalag 19, and somebody figures out how to get out of Stalag 19, right? So I think that's one of those things where when it becomes more prevalent in society and it becomes a greater concern, I think jurors are going to have more of a concern about it than judges, because judges, quite frankly, need to take attorneys at their face value, take us at our word on a pretty regular basis on some very important issues. And I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror every day and know that I'm doing the right things and doing them for the right reasons. So, and the officers feel the same way. It doesn't take very long for an officer to reveal his true colors. Same way with an attorney. And if you, I tell officers all the time, all we have is our reputation, our name, and what we know. And so, if you're willing to cheapen yourself and cheapen the process by taking shortcuts on those things, then Lord help you, because you're not going to last very long. So I think some of that is going to be the human factor. We can't totally take the human factor out of it. And I think judges are going to continue to have to rely on that to a certain extent. But I also do think that as AI becomes more of a thing, more accessible to the world, more widely used, jurors will become much more suspicious of anything digital because of AI and because of what they've heard about AI and what they've seen, like what you talked about. So I think it's going to be partly on the judges, but partly on the juries that we're going to have to convince them that AI was not used to generate this evidence. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to contend with much more in the future than we do right now.
Yeah, I would say also that an audit trail would be really important in a digital evidence management system to demonstrate that once the evidence was collected, that it wasn't manipulated or enhanced in some way while maintaining the original piece of evidence if there's something that's been redacted, for instance. So, looking forward, what developments or trends do you envision shaping the future of digital evidence management in the legal profession?
We're still going to have infrastructure problems or challenges, I should say, maybe not problems, but challenges, because we continue to generate larger and larger quantities of digital evidence and data that need to be stored, need to be cataloged, need to be assigned, need to be analyzed. So that's going to continue to be, the infrastructure is going to continue to be an issue. And then as the volume continues to increase, the analysis issues there are going to continue to plague us, with effective analysis being a really important part of it. Because as I stated before, if you have the data, but you don't know it's there and don't know how to use it or access it, it's really not very useful to you. So those are going to be huge issues that we have going forward. And that's where I think some of the opportunities lie for companies to come in and help assist with those things and make sure that data can be well stored and well analyzed and well presented and well preserved for use in court.
Is certainly, and that's where utility would come in, because we have the solutions to those dilemmas, those challenges, those issues that you've spoke of. And so I'm really curious, because from a law enforcement perspective, and you well know this, it's been very difficult for us to keep up with all the changes in technology, keeping our staff trained and keeping upgrading the technological tools that we have that help us. Is that an issue for prosecution as well?
100%. We do work with our law enforcement partners closely. We rely on them in large part for a lot of the analysis. We rely on them for a large part of the acquisition. But even so, we still have to have that material and prepare it for court. So we can only lean on our so much. Cell phone crunching, we call it. Crunch this cell phone. Tell me where this guy was, and depending on the type of data that's available, they can create maps with software and so on and so forth that will do that for you. But that's something we still have to be able to present to a jury. We need to be able to converse enough to explain it to a jury. Even if the law enforcement partners are doing all of the crunching for us, we still have to be able to talk about it. We have to become expert enough to get that evidence in, convince the court that there's a proper foundation for it, know the right questions to ask there, and then understand the process enough to know when a defense attorney asks a question that's out of left field, but the jury doesn't know that, we have to know enough to be able to ask the follow-up question that allows that officer to debunk that theory or to blow that out of the water and help to the jury to understand that's not a thing. That's not what we're talking about here. This isn't subject to that type of manipulation, so on and so forth. So yeah, staying on the front. And again, I think we're still all going to be trailing the technology train. It's just how far back on the train are you? And, you know, can you maintain a level of proficiency that allows you to do the job and do it well?
So, just out of curiosity, does the St. Joseph County Prosecutor's Office still have a specialized unit in digital forensics that works in tandem with them?
We do, and they specifically focus on cell phones. Largely, they can do other devices, but they focus on cell phones. And we're partnered with the University of Notre Dame in that regard. And we've had it's been a class at Notre Dame where we deputize students as investigators, and they do the analysis and the download of data from cell phones for us. So yeah, we're very blessed in that regard. And when we talk about being kind of one of the leaders in the field, our office created this partnership with Notre Dame, and then the state of Indiana said, "Hey, this is a really great thing." And then they created other, we call it our cyber crimes unit. They've created other cyber crimes units that are state units that are state funded around the state of Indiana. Some are partnered with colleges, some are not, but
Mhm.
do the same sort of thing in other locations so that even smaller jurisdictions have access to the same kind of services that we do with our cyber crimes unit.
Yeah, I ask you that specifically, Chris, because I credit you with bringing my agency on board with that. And as you recall, a conversation we had probably 8 years ago, I had concerns when you extended the invitation that perhaps that we had to utilize the services of both those units and the University of Notre Dame. I had concerns with, I wasn't thinking outside the box. You quickly put my fears at ease. I was worried about confidentiality. And then there was the aspect of you've deputized these students, so that is covered, and that your office kind of took some of the liability concern away from that. But I was also concerned that they were students that may be here today but gone next semester, and would they be immersed in the middle of a case, and the next thing you know, they're graduating and moving on, and someone fresh would come in and would have to start back from ground zero. But it has been seamless. It's been a great partnership, and quite frankly, these students and my home, I joke my IT department are my son and daughter. If I have an issue, I say something to them, and within 30 seconds, it's resolved. These young students seem to know a lot more than us older guys and gals do when it comes to technology. So it's been a great partnership for you.
I agree. And, to answer the question for part of the issue that you raised there about the continuity, that's why we have supervisors there that are versed on every case and every investigation and can take up if one of those students goes back home to California and the case is coming to trial. The supervisor can faithfully testify. They supervised every case, part of that case, and reviewed the findings and can testify about those in court. So we've been able to do that too. And there's a lot of cases that happen like that, not just in the digital world, but an autopsy where a forensic pathologist leaves and goes to another place, quits practicing or retires or passes away or something.
Mm-hmm.
Their supervisor can review the file, review everything else, even the subsequent pathologist can review everything and then testify about those. There's case law in Indiana, at least, that talks about that and solves those problems. But yeah, that's a thing, and it's really been a huge blessing for us, and they've been a force multiplier.
Yeah, it was exactly the word that I was going to use, the term that I was going to use, a force multiplier. And, I would suggest, and I know you would too, that for the prosecutors' offices out there that are viewing this webinar today, that if they have a college or university that's nearby, if they don't have a program, a partnership like that, with students that are involved in criminal justice and have that discipline, that maybe it's something that they look into, because I really do believe it's a win-win situation. And in some cases, for agencies that have manpower shortages, it may be a good way to recruit as well.
Agreed. Absolutely. Those are
Yeah.
a couple of benefits to the program itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and giving us your experience and and lending us your expertise as well. It's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned so much from you, and I look forward to us reconnecting again soon and perhaps do another webinar and update where the St. Joseph County Prosecutor's Office is with digital evidence management and the successes that you're having. So, thank you for taking the time and sharing your experiences with our viewers today.
It's been my pleasure, and I hope it's been beneficial. Thank you.
Yep. Stay safe and always remain vigilant, my friend.
Thank you. You too.